Introduce our presenter, Dr. Azam Afzal. He's currently working as a senior instructor in the Department of Medicine and Department for Educational Development. With over 10 years experience in health professions education, he has worked for CPSP before joining to AKU. He's also a faculty champion for Center of Innovation in Medical Education. He also leads the Medical College Research Group for Teaching and Learning. Currently, he is the director for Teaching and Learning course and co-director for the assessment course in MHP program. I would like to invite Dr. Azam Afzal. Please come over to you, Dr.
Azam. Thank you, Amber. So student engagement is a topic that's very close to my heart because initially when I first got into medical education, I actually had challenges with it. But then obviously as I've grown as an educator, so you learn a lot of things. And some of it will hopefully come out here as well. So this was why I kind of chose this topic. So as the title says, student engagement in the classroom and beyond, right? So first of all, I'd like to state that I have no financial or commercial interests in this session other than just teaching you guys, okay? And having a good discussion afterwards. So my talk is going to structure around or focus around what is student engagement, why is it important, why is there a problem, and what can be done, okay? So both by institutions and at an individual level, faculty, and for students as well. So first of all, big question, what is student engagement? What does it look like? When I ask you, what do you think student engagement is, what comes to mind?
They should be actively participating.
They should be actively participating. Okay. Anything else?
Active participation in the learning process.
Same thing. Yes, active participation in the learning process.
Engaging their interest throughout the session.
Okay. So how do you know if they're engaged? As all of what you said is true, and from the perspective of teacher, you know this. It's tougher to put into words. It's easier to show in a picture. Are these students engaged? And they should be looking like probably this, right? So it's हो जाता है. When you're talking about jokes, you're talking in the beginning, you're talking about, okay, I'm watching this on Netflix. They're all ears. And that is also a strategy. Okay. So before we actually get into the nitty-gritty academic definition, which we can kind of tease out, I'm going to stress upon why it's important and what the literature says. Okay. So why is it important? So this is a little model for memory and working memory. So as we can see over here, Sam pointer. Yes. So the sensory memory, all sensory inputs come in and have to go to the short-term memory where it is processed and then encoded and goes into long-term memory, right? For this, the important thing is attention. Because if whatever you're not paying attention to, that sensory input is being lost. So if you have good engagement, you have good attention because you're paying attention. There is good processing, there's good encoding, and long-term memory improves. Okay. And this has been shown in the literature in various things. So what the literature says is that there is a relationship between beliefs, emotions, and achievement. There's a positive relationship between academic engagement and achievement in health science students. There is engagement with learning, reflections on learning methods and experiences, and the application of what they've learned into real world or future practice. is better. At least that's what some researchers have seen. And of course, flipping the classroom and flipped classrooms, and this is one of the seminal works that actually caught the attention of the flipped classroom, was that it improves student performance and satisfaction because it improves student engagement, right? And that started a whole chain reaction of now that's very much in vogue. Okay, so to help define or get our working definition, this is a certain model that was proposed by Javier Harvela and Ringer, and I know that I'm completely probably mispronouncing his Spanish name, poor guy. And what this basically shows is that there are three components for student engagement, right? So if student engagement is good, right, it's dependent on motivation. What they have described motivation as extrinsic and situational and personal is actually intrinsic. So this is all motivation. Emotions, self-efficacy, and self-regulation. And they also feed into each other. Because if you're able to regulate properly, you can have engagement. So it's not completely like a passive thing. Okay, students do have some control over their own engagement levels as well. Of course, they have some control over the motivations, and that leads to a perceived self-efficacy. And having that self-efficacy itself enhances motivation, student engagement in the activity. Because if you know that you can do something, you're going to take more interest in it. If you know that this is going to be difficult, or you perceive it's going to be difficult and it's beyond your capabilities, you're probably not going to engage into it, or it's going to be very difficult for you. So it's just, so things have to be challenging, but just at the right amount for it to be engaging, or the activities to be engaging. That's one takeaway that we can walk away with. So the definition, or one that I thought that would be good, is student engagement refers to the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that students show when they are learning or being taught, which extends to the level of motivation that they have to learn and progress in their education. Yes, it sounds like a big ask. So if it's all the way down here, so if engagement is on a scale, this definition would probably be a 10. But that's exactly what we want from a definition, right? Not something in midway. What is 100% engagement? And we'll see how this helps and feeds in, and how this can be fostered. Like I said, it looks like a big ask, right? Will they be doing this thing? And knowing our students, yaar wo phone niche rakh de to phir, yes, we all do it as well. So why is there a problem? So without pointing anything on students, faculty, or anything, what I found from literature was that what schools do not do, and this is schools being in general, not just colleges, not just universities, schools as well, primary schools, secondary schools, they do not facilitate positive social and emotional development with the same commitment that they have to cognitive development. That means they focus more time on the knowledge and teaching, and not on personality development, not on motivation, not on behavior. They inadequately address barriers to teaching and learning comprehensively, and do not concentrate on intrinsic motivation as they strive to enhance student engagement and re-engage disconnected students. Okay. Sounds a lot in terms of words. Let me simplify it down a bit. This is a model proposed by Deci and Ryan. Some of you may be familiar with it. Pretty famous. It shows, or it breaks down intrinsic motivation. Their work was entirely on motivation. Okay. And they defined kind of a continuum of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Okay. So at one end, you have completely unmotivated And all of this is extrinsic motivation to some degree and intrinsic to some degree being mixed. And of course, we have what we want, complete intrinsic motivation. So now we can see over here, what is described is the source of the motivation. Okay, so internal, external, somewhat internal, internal, and internal. So there's two levels of internal. And what regulates this motivation at these levels? Okay, so at A motivational, it's basically non-intentional and non-valuing incompetence, and there's no control over anything. And at the other end, when complete internal, there's interest, there's enjoyment, there's inherent satisfaction, there's self-satisfaction. Okay, so that's what regulates. And in between, you have other various external and some internal as your continuum shifts toward going from external to internal. Okay, so at different activities, we can all place ourselves somewhere on this scale. Okay, what it also gives us is, as teachers, as students, if we develop our students that way, they know what to do, how to make themselves more interested as well. You know, how would faculty foster it? Because these things are kind of observable, right? If we know that that some students are only teaching to a test, you know, you would try to foster a more internalized approach, and this would help. Right, so we kind of saw what the problem was, and now let's spend some more time on what can be done. So a lot of times when we're talking about in-class activities, the main reason that students are disengaged is they're not following what this is called is the trifecta of student engagement, right? Which Moore kind of proposed quite some time back in '89. And what this shows is that for the trifecta, that means all of them, these interactions need to be there. They need to be learner-to-learner interactions. They need to be learner-to-content interactions. And of course, learner-to-instruction interactions. So a lot of times you'll have this, and you'll have this, or to some level this. Like, if one of these components is missing, so your student engagement may be suboptimal. Okay. And this is important when you're looking at small group sessions, you're looking at other sessions which you're giving work to do, right? Even if it's something like a lecture, you can actually build in these activities that actually foster these things. So your students will not get bored. Right. So apart from this, we sort of talked about, you know, lectures, and lectures is by far the most, or should I say least student engagement friendly. Okay, and that's why there's a big move, okay, what should we do? Because the truth is it's very convenient and it's very easy to organize, and it caters to a larger audience. So it's very convenient, that very feasible. However, engagement is a problem. So there are some strategies that can be used to replace, supplement, or enhance. So one of the things that can be used is, of course, PBLs and other small group teaching methodologies. There's PBLs, there's CBLs, a lot more. There is, of course, very commonly now being used as a replacement for lectures is team-based learning. So how that little session, so you can actually concentrate not on transmitting the knowledge before, you give the information beforehand, you concentrate on micro-teaching, and you try to engage the students by making sure that your learning objectives are actually application-based activities. So in that 1 hour or 1.5 hour slot that you'd actually put for lecture, you structure it accordingly. Okay. Simulation-based or real-world experiential learning. Okay, so simulation-based is, of course, a method of experiential learning, but Apart from that, if it can be, experiential learning is, of course, our clerkships and in our medical college. But apart from that, field visits, get them out into the community, get them out into seeing what it is that needs to be done there. And of course, when you have to take a lecture, restructure it. Instead of thinking about putting in content for 50 or 55 or 60 minutes, restructure into blocks of 20, 15 to 20 minutes. Then take a brain break for about 5 minutes, in which you can give an activity or you can just let them do something and then come back, re-engage them, do another 15 minutes of teaching. And you can structure your activity, your lecture around that. Because I mean, even myself, I think probably after 15, 17 minutes at max, I've tuned out. And then I'll notice that I've tuned out maybe 3 minutes after that, and then I'll tune in for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'll tune out again. And that's basically what happens to probably all of us in that 1 hour. Okay, so instead of doing that, keep it in noticeable or sizable chunks that way, or manageable chunks of 15 to 20 minutes. So that gives students a chance for their attention to redevelop. Okay, when you give them a break, give them a brain break, so their attention will restore. They can give another 15 minutes, and you can structure your lecture accordingly. So that's something that faculty can do. Another thing that faculty can do is there's a model called the Mayer's multimedia method of learning. Okay, it's very apt, or it fits very well within our teaching modality, because right now the majority of our teaching is either presentation based on a PowerPoint or a video. So we're automatically kind of using that multimedia for teaching. It is multimedia teaching. So there is a proper methodology, and it three main principles in which they've kind of developed a whole series of guidelines, and I think there's a book on it as well. And that three main principles is that there is a dual processing channel, or there is a auditory and visual channel for sensory input. And of course, they should be both used complementary in a complementary fashion. Okay, so if you have text at the bottom, like if you're showing something, then it's better to narrate it as opposed to just let people read it, because narrating it actually is better. Yeah, and that's what the theory has shown. Each channel has a limited capacity, or what we also call synonymously has its cognitive load, right? Probably the visual has a higher load than the auditory, because the auditory has a bottleneck. It requires more processing in the brain to actually make sense of the words. Okay, that's why pictures are easier to understand in the brain. So whenever you're trying to narrate something, try to have a visual representation along with it. And of course, learning is an active process which requires filtering, selecting, organizing, and integrating information based on what students already know. Okay, so that means they should start with what students already know. And faculty's main job is to then filter that knowledge, not provide content overload, and allow students activities in which they will select, they will organize their own knowledge, and they will integrate the information. So this is what the activities should foster in development. Right, so that's a little bit about teaching. Beyond teaching, when we come to mentorship, when we talked about internal motivation, right? So, or intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation has three primary components which foster it, and that is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Okay, if students feel that they are part of something bigger, that means relatedness, and this is a bigger thing, it's a community thing, they will be more intrinsically motivated for it. if they, like when we saw self-efficacy, if they think that they're competent at it, they feel competent at it, this will enhance intrinsic motivation as well. And of course, autonomy. If they don't have a choice, then it's external motivation, right? They should have some choice in the matter. They should have some control. Okay. And these things should be kept in mind when we're developing activities, when we're developing scheduling. And this is some of the areas that can actually foster. Okay, this is the Association of Medical Education of Europe's areas of excellence for student engagement. Okay, so the areas that they have defined and in which student engagement can occur apart from the classroom is that student engagement with the management of the school or the governance, okay, with the policy and mission vision of the school, student engagement in the provision of the school's education program, with the delivery of teaching and its assessment. Okay, they should have some say in it. Students' engagement in the academic community, right? Especially in the research programs and participation in meetings. And of course, student engagement in the local community and delivery of healthcare service. Okay. So this is what Amy has kind of devised, and I'm very glad to see Kulsum here. So I'll call in you later on when we're doing the panel discussion, so she can shed a little bit more light on this when in context of AKU, right? Because we have an Amy Award for Excellence for Student Engagement and Inspire Award. Yes. So, but this is not the only the areas that we are limited to. Okay, we can go beyond. Okay, we talked about intellectual engagement. There is also emotional engagement. Okay, which is right. So it encompasses fostering emotional support for other students. Okay, helping your students out as because that also gives that feeling of community, togetherness, and competence. Okay, behavioral mainly meaning that how in our medical college context would be how students or residents develop their professional identity. Okay, and if they have some control and they have some onus over it, how they see themselves, that also contributes to engagement. Physical, of course, we know the easiest. You know, we have activities, we have co-curricular activities. Same thing with social, and of course, cultural. Cultural has two aspects. It can be both cultural in terms of, you know, what are the ethnic cultures, and you can have activities based around that. And of course, the organizational cultures itself. What are the organization policies, like, for example, what are the values that it instills, and how does that translate to the student? Okay. So in summary, we saw what student engagement is. It's attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and of course the passion to learn. Why is it important? Because it leads to better academic performance and of course outcomes. The main problem is, of course, it focuses on intrinsic motivation or the lack of intrinsic motivation. And what can be done? We just, well, there's a whole things from in-class activities and management and, you know, curricular planning that can be used to kind of help foster intrinsic motivation and provide students opportunities beyond the classroom to engage in at not just the classroom level, but at the community level, at the research level, right? And I will be talking about that as well. Okay, thank you. That was it for me. Thank you for giving me your attention. And I hope I didn't go over 20 minutes, like I said.
Thank you, Dr. Azam, for a wonderful presentation. Now, the session is open for discussion, panel discussion. I would like to invite Dr. Aisha Mia for the panel discussion. She's currently working as an associate professor, chair of the department, and dean of the student. She's a co-chair of the International Relations Committee of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. She is also a member of the Executive Council of the International Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Allied Professions. So Dr. Aisha Mia, would you like to come on the stage? I would also like to invite Dr. Khairul-Nisa Ajani. She's currently working as an assistant professor and assistant dean teaching learning undergraduate programs at the Afan University Hospital, School of Nursing and Midwifery. She has been working with AKU Sonam at various administrative positions and has gained a vast experience of working with all the academic programs. Dr. Ajani, please. We have a student, final year medical student, Mr. Muhammad Ibrahim Habib. He's a final year medical student at the Afan University. He's the president of a student-led group known as SPI, Society for Promoting Innovation in Education. So please come on stage. We have few participants online as well. Mr. Zubair, can you hear us? Mr. Zubair, okay. Mr. Muhammad Zubair, can you hear us? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So. Okay. So the session is open for questions in any query, any clarification, audience.
बड़ी मेहरबानी सर आपने बताया तो हो गया ये अच्छा होगा
Your presentation, I think this is very important student engagement, and I think it all depends here how much students engage, and then it all depends on their future life, what they are learning and how they engage. My question is to the student himself: what challenges you feel in student engagement? Your own experience and your class experience, and you've seen significantly low number of students attending lectures. Why so? And basically, what are the different challenges?
So, thank you for the question. My name is Brahmi, I'm a medical student here. I agree with your point that there are many challenges, and I think that it all boils down to the idea that we need to start moving from the idea of students as just passive learners to more active engagers in their education, where I think that the reason why there's a minimal turnout, as Dr. Azam mentioned as well, that when you have didactic lecture formats where just a presenter comes up, he has a multimedia presentation and just delivers a slide, it doesn't provide any context to students about what they're learning about. So if you contextualize education and make it more personalized for that student, that would be more important because they need to understand, okay, I'm learning XYZ facts and reasons, but this is what it means to me at the end of the day. As a person who's aspiring to be a professional in the future, inshallah, I need to know this information for XYZ reasons. And then you should be able to engage with the lecturer as well. It should just be a one-way exchange of information. It should be two-way. And in that sense, there should also be more active feedback from the students where they have more active control of their education. So if I can give you just one example. So when we, so I've actually helped found an organization, student-led organization called SPI. We work with the CNU, the Center of Innovation Medical Education. And a lot of the things that our projects have been around education, community engagement, and research. And a lot of these things are student-driven in the sense that a couple of our students had an idea in their second and third year that there was a cardiac murmur mannequin over there, and it was not being used as a part of the curriculum, but hadn't been integrated as a formal part of the education. But then they had the idea, why don't we learn from an instructor on it, how to teach, and then we'll teach our peers about it. So they started an entire peer-to-peer teaching program. I also take sessions on a 2-monthly basis where I engage with juniors, and this entire concept of peer-to-peer learning, where I'm also talking to my seniors and my mentors about how can I fix this, how can I do this better. So converting passive learners into active teachers is something which is great.
Perhaps being a little modest, the SPY group also engaged at a community level when they trained teachers from Dawood Public School and one more. Yes, so it's question.
Right, to the panel probably, but again directly to the student a little more. I think we as educators try our level best to engage a class of 100, right? But somehow we always stagger, And believe me, many a times I feel when I'm standing on this side using all these strategies, I find myself at a loss wondering, where am I faltering? Because I want each of those 100 to be actively participating, using all these strategies, believe me. Few thoughts, comments.
Again, I think that it's that the issue that, in my opinion, is it's more intrinsic issue about the structure of these lectures, in my opinion. But when you talk about a group of 100 and engaging every single one of them, that seems a little difficult to me, even conceptually, because I think, as Dr. Azman mentioned, the way that we're shifting from a trend of larger lectures to smaller team-based learning, where there's a facilitator for each of these teams, that would be a way forward where you'd be able to engage each of them individually.
But at a national level, we still have those 150 to 100 students.
So one of the ways that you could, like I said, you could structure that thing into mini 20-minute bite-sized things.
Yes.
And in that 5 minutes, put some sort of engagement activity, even if it's just simply, okay, what I want you to do right now is you can do 2-3 things. Either give them something to solve based on what you've taught them, so they can apply that, or give them an activity which has nothing related to do this, which frees up their brain from the content, okay? And actually that's what you call a brain.
So 100 is hard, right? And also I'm not so sure if we need all 100 to be attentive all the time, right? So, a lot of you may have seen me sitting and working in the faculty lounge or sitting outside the courtyard because I need a little buzz around, something to keep me attentive. If I go and sit down in an office, I kind of get distracted, I blank out. A lot of students need to be talking to each other, but they're also paying attention, right? So we worry. That's my sense of having done this for a very long time, and also myself being somebody who can multitask. I can listen to what I'm saying, what's happening here. That we worry unki attention ho gayi hai, so that's why they're talking to each other. But a lot of times they may be talking about what you're teaching them. I just did a talk on mindful leadership with them. बहुत हंगामा था, बहुत शोर था, and Rita was getting very worried if they're not paying attention. But I was like, let them do it. A lot of times they were just talking about what I was teaching, seemed interesting to them, so they were आपस में पूछ रहे थे mindfulness क्या होता है, तुम्हारे भी काम करता है, मेरे भी काम नहीं करता, and stuff. The worry with that is that sometimes it gets disruptive for the other people who want to pay attention, who want to learn a certain way. And I think there needs to be a balance because not each student is going to be learning. So I think there is that piece. Also, sometimes I feel now that I've been reading about and learning about, and just my own learning about active learning for such a long time, that when we try to bring in different things, it almost seems now that there's so much onus and so much responsibility on the person who's teaching कि कुछ ना कुछ antics आप करते रहें कि उनको आपने engage रखना है. अभी एक joke बोले, अभी ये करें, अभी वो करें, and you're like कितना करें, क्या करें? Like how much can be like jump around or show cartoons and stuff. So I think again it's it comes to what you also talked about, intrinsic motivation. कि उनकी क्या intrinsic motivation है, नहीं है. So they can go, these are all adult learners now, right? I'm also quite okay कि आपको नहीं रहना तो if you feel that you have a better way of learning what I'm teaching you, whether it's anatomy or whatever, please leave and go sit in the library and study. That's perfectly fine with me. At the end of the day, there is going to be an exam and it's your accountability what you do. So I think that we also need to not worry too much about it. We can teach those 20, and that's how they want to learn. The other ones that are kind of not take so much pressure. In some ways, I just feel like we can.
Completely agree, Aisha. That's really important. And also, what seems to work in some clinical-based sessions, especially with the health sciences piece, that if you place your teaching into examples of reality, that also helps connect with the student. That reality is there, that not all 100 would want to listen to what you're saying. They may have their own issues that day, they are not in the mood or in the mood kind of a thing. But when you place them into examples, for example, I've been involved in teaching critical care nursing. So if I have to start with chest trauma or something, and I have seen the differences starting from the transparency or a session versus starting with a live case that I've dealt with, gunshot or theft or something, build that background and then put chest trauma into how that patient moved. That seems to have worked many a time. Because it's like human connection, that what happened, then what happened? What was the end of the patient? How did you as an emergency nurse perform that time, and how were we able to connect that into that reality example sometimes also?
Hi, it's very interesting student engagement, and we get to know a lot of techniques also. But my question is related to the person who would be planning this. So it seems that if you're planning a session that should be engaging students, it needs a lot of preparation, it needs a lot of coming up with ideas. And in academia, we also count things like publication, grant writing. There are so many other things that the instructor has to do. So how they can manage between balancing engagement and cost a lot of this promotion?
Can I answer that? Yes, you answer it.
So one comment first. Good teaching is always good preparation.
Yeah, and you
Okay. You have to prepare. I mean, that's part and parcel of the job. Because if you don't prepare, then you're preparing yourself to fail.
I would completely second that, and I would say that being a content expert does not make you a good teacher. This is a complete fallacy that just because you know the content, it automatically makes you a teacher. A teaching is a skill, it has a skill set that is acquired, then there's a layer of art that is molded into it, and it's something that we have to develop. So this common fallacy that you end up with a PhD and now go off and teach a class, absolutely wrong. In fact, people who have PhDs are probably the worst equipped to teach because they don't know how to break it down into it. But it's not as difficult as it sounds. Yeah, sometimes you do fun things like this. Sometimes it's just about inserting something of your personal interest. So I'll give you an example. Just this morning in this very lecture hall, and I was very grateful to see, there's about 60, 70 students. We were talking about molecular biology. It can be very dry for somebody who's not really engaged in it. So I did exactly what Fairness was talking about. Why is this interesting from a clinical perspective, right? But even then, just say that, look, in Parkinson's or something, you may see these molecular receptors aggregated. We talked about, I had an excerpt from it, Ibrahim probably will not because he will remember this from when I gave the lecture to him, but just an excerpt from a book which talks about mental health, and then it goes into it's a very literary description of receptors and things, but it's just some way to connect the audience with what you're talking about, and somewhere else that they can hang their hat. It doesn't always have to be on solid content. It's something else that they can imagine around.
Roxana Zaveri from the Department of Education Development. I would actually like to take this a little forward and beyond the lecture. We are so sometimes obsessive about it, we can't get out of it. Student engagement is much more than teaching in a lecture, or in a classroom, or in the hospital, or teaching at all. It's all about learning. And student engagement is a fantastic way of learning a number of those esoteric competencies that we struggle with. It's student engagement in research that will make them scholars. It's student engagement in school management that will make them professionals and managers and leaders. It's student engagement in channelizing the curriculum, in helping us put policies together for examinations, that on one day we will help you make policies elsewhere. So for me, student engagement, if you do not have student engagement in the curriculum, you're not doing anything except producing people who may know stuff. To me, knowledge becomes old hat in 10 years. And knowledge, when you graduate and are out there, is going to be available at your fingertips. It's not going to be as important as we think about it today. What's going to be more important is all these other student engagement areas.
Yes, Karen. Yes, Karen.
I'd like to second what Dr. Zaberi said, and I'd just like to bring your attention towards something that I heard in a workshop where one of the medical faculties complained about that students are not attending their classrooms, and the speaker asked a question, why they should even attend your classroom. What are your classrooms giving them that is not available on the internet? If your classrooms are actually giving them those slides, those definitions, and all that knowledge thing, which is already available and maybe in a better form through these tutorials on YouTube. Imagine there's a lot of information out there, books, then why should a student just come in your class and sit for like 3 hours? And that means your class should be giving something more than knowledge. That should be something developing skills. And that takes us back to what AKU expects graduate, the skills that AKU expect. So I think as faculty members, we need to ask ourselves that, are we making critical thinkers? So if I am just coming up with a PowerPoint slide and I'm giving out that information about a certain disease process, am I addressing those things? These things are already there out. So why a student should come? A student will attend your class if you are giving something else. If he gets a chance to interact with his peers, if there is a way to enhance his critical thinking, if you are giving some problems that enhance his problem solving skills, so that takes him like, a step further to what is already available. Then second thing is that I believe we've talked about a lot of strategies that now we think that sometimes faculty members are overwhelmed that what kind of strategies to use and what not to use. And I think that student engagement is beyond the names of the strategies. A simple blackboard can engage a student really well, depending on if a teacher knows what engages students. So it does not matter that you need to use a group work. I mean, all those strategies are good and will engage students really well, but I think it's beyond naming the strategies. It is if you know what engages. So student participation can be equally done through using Blackboard, though the chalk and talk method is called as very traditional, but if a teacher knows how to do it, then that works very well. Lectures are called as very traditional, but there are terms that are called as interactive lectures. So without using any PowerPoint presentation, without using anything, you can still engage your learners. So I think we don't need to overwhelm ourselves with what kind of strategies we are using, but if we know the principles of engagement, that your student should be participating, your student should ask you questions, there should be some kind of collaborative work happening, there should be some kind of peer discussion happening in it. If these things are there, then no matter if it's a lecture, it's a group work, it's a Mentimeter, it's a Kahoot, if these things are present, the student engagement will happen. Thank you.
So I want to just add to what Dr. Zubairi was talking about, and also perhaps repeat what Ibrahim was saying. So Ibrahim talked about peer teaching and teaching. So when I want to learn something, I teach it. Okay? There is no other way for me to learn. I can go to all TED Talks, I can go to all lectures and stuff. I will not learn it. If I wanted to, learn about leadership, I started teaching it. And we're not asking our students to teach. So I think that is just that piece that now with flipped classroom, team-based learning, are we putting them in a position to teach? It's a culture change. It will take time. Students don't want to, because now they have to be actively learning and if they don't want to do it as much. But that's just one thing to think about. The second thing, I think, when we're talking about student engagement, again, as Dr. Zubair said, it's not just the classroom. So one of the things that you talked about was culture, right? Are the students engaged with ATU, right? Are they engaged with what our organizational culture is? Are they engaged with what our ethos is? Are they engaged? Do they have the intrinsic motivation to be at ATU and learn to be the kind of doctors that ATU says that we produce, or nurses that they produce? You talked about professional identity formation. Is that part of their ethos that at the end of 5 years, this is the kind of nurse I want to be, and ATU is the best place that is going to make me into that kind of a nurse? So those are bigger questions that I think once we have those things in place, where the students are engaged with the institution, that's when intrinsic motivation will come automatically. It'll just follow. And again, as you said, that we focus a lot on cognitive piece of it, cognitive engagement, emotional engagement. Are they emotionally engaged? I don't think so. Okay, most of them will come say, Emily's studying on Jana, which is fine too. If that's their engagement, then we say, okay, what do we do about it? But how are they engaging with the institution? How are they engaging with what's happening on the wards? How are they engaging with the teachers? How are the teachers engaging, with the organizational culture, and is that filtering through? So those are, I think, the larger questions that are really important for us to think at a sort of bigger level to get to this intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
So just to add, you see, if the students are not engaged in the management, they're not going to be really engaged. We expect them to be engaged as a passive person. They're listening and they have to be engaged. They have to be active listeners and listeners and listeners. Sometimes they can take the lead and we can listen, right? They have to be, it needs to be a partnership. Okay, when they're juniors, they're more heavily controlled can be with the teachers, but as they progress through medical through life, I'm not saying something theoretical, but they can have more and more control of what they want to learn and how they learn it. And I think it's a culture change the faculty needs to inculcate and enhance within their own thinking. And if students don't come to lectures, I think that's something I don't think they need to worry about. It is something they need to learn. They can learn it through lectures, they can learn it through web, they can learn it in the library, as long as they learn it. It is not incumbent, it is more of suppose I was going to take a lecture, let me put it on myself. And I stood and there were 10 people. Then it would be, if I don't like it or walk out, it's my ego problem. I think.
Yes.
So, clinical teaching and in the ward rounds, during the ward rounds, how to engage students and residents and the whole team for the clinical teaching again is very, very challenging. With all the demanding things, discharge, a number of things are going on in the wards, and students are also suppose I am doing I'm doing internal medicine, and with me, there are residents, senior residents, junior residents, and there are final year medical students, and a third year medical student. About 10 to 12 people are doing rounds with me. So what I try to, how I do this student engagement, to ask them stimulating questions and encourage them to ask clarifying questions. One. The other thing is that my first question is always during my rounds to the most junior person. I do not spend much time to that answer, but quickly move to the senior one and aista कहते बाद senior resident तक चली जाती है. लेकिन होता ही है कि the team is important. And then the other thing what I usually do in my round for many years is engage in patient management, history taking, and physical examination a student and a resident coupled for one patient, and start a history by a student and maybe physical examination other approaches by a resident or vice versa. So the team is engaged. So I think it's very, very important that how you're doing rounds, how you're engaging students. And I think that is a number of times missing, and students or residents are doing a number of things during the rounds. So these are my comments. If you want to add anything on it.
No, I completely agree with you. That's an ideal way to go about it, because at the end of the day, the way that you will make inspire students to go back and learn and really be involved in these clinical learning is by inculcating that sense of ownership within them. Give ownership that that is my patient and I'm providing a meaningful part of their care. So that value within them, if you create it, and it's not just for the fact that I have to present to this consultant because he's going to grade me at the end. It should be because I'm meaningfully contributing to the care of my patient, and that ownership is something which is important. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
One thing which I would like to highlight here, which is a very big challenge with us here in higher education, is keeping in mind the context, the system of education, and the diversity where the student is coming in from. It is what Dr. Zubairi was trying to say is very important that we flip sides and we listen to them first, or we give them the ownership of learning. But there is a very important piece of orientation and transition that has to be created before it is completely handed over. The traditional school systems that some of our students come in from, and they enter the university, from the physical layout of the university to how the curriculum is taught, is extremely different from what they are used to. And if you just hand it over to them saying that, okay, from today you are the adult learner, you read it yourself and come back, they're completely lost. So that transition of how to transform them into adult learners, what will make them a good learner, those factors are also to be kept in mind when planning the education sessions, the curriculum, and how to invite a year 1 student to a year 4 student to come and sit in your meetings. The first year student, first semester, वो तो tremors के साथ बेचारा होगा कि इतने सारे teachers के सामने I'm going to speak. How do you make them comfortable so they are able to share their ideas of how they would want to learn? So this transition also becomes very, very important.
There's a transition, that's why I said increasing control over time. The other thing is, if you do not do it, you have a number of people coming from diverse backgrounds, and some of them already have those skills as well as that knowledge, as well as that inclination. If you do not put in increasing control given to the students, you are going to suffocate their growth.
One more aspect that I wanted to add was the fact that when you're just focusing on that cognitive aspect of development, you're losing out and you're dehumanizing your students because the contextualization is lost. Because nowadays, when you talk about students, when they're doing something as simple as taking a history, maybe they won't go into depth and treat the other person on the other end as a human. You should ask them about their context. If they're in a very critical stage and they got this far, why didn't they seek care before? So understanding that the person in front of you is a real person, and there's no one treatment fits all kind of category. So being able to do that and humanizing our medical education is something which is very important.
And it's so important. Humanization is excellent. History taking is one of the major things which we have is economy. The shortcuts in history taking is going on everywhere. Straight away आप पास मेडिकल हिस्ट्री पे आ जाओगे. अगर आपने प्रॉपर हिस्ट्री प्रेजेंटिंग का पेन किया तो you would be engaged with this, and then you would be knowing much more about it. So that's important.
I think Ibrahim, right? What Ibrahim said is very correct. We're so fixed sometimes on the technical aspects, without going into what is the empathy that's being developed between the student and his patient or her patient. I think that's another thing that we need to do, that we need to give control. even of the patients.
So that was what I said, the social and emotional component needs to be bumped up and to the level of cognition as well. Because social and emotional is a lot more than just, for example, empathy, right? Do we know how our students learn? So that's a big thing as well. When you come to the higher education, they're coming from a system that encourages a lot of external motivation, right? So can you transition them? Do they need to be able to learn? Can they become self-directed learners? How do you support them? Okay. All of those aspects then kind of come into it.
I think what's also important is all of us to keep up with the generational differences. So this Gen Z, right? They are so different from who we are. So different. I had my own moment of enlightenment. I was talking to my 18-year-old son, and I think I was thinking I'm a cool parent, right? So I'm like, जो हमारे parents में और हम भी difference था, and वो तो, I'm sure that they don't have it with us and then I with you. Things like, no, you're very different. And I'm like, no, and then I'm thinking, okay, we are Gen X and maybe boomers. I'm like, no, see, I can tell you, I can show you. And I'm like, started to Google, okay, Gen X, जो हम लोग हैं और उसमें कितना difference और कितना था. He said, just that, what you're doing right now. Having to figure out what it is, having to immediately check, intellectualizing everything cognitively, finding lists. ये difference है. We don't do this kind of stuff, right? And it's important for us to know that because they don't. And I said, well, then how do you learn? He said, I don't know, through memes. So that to me, it really sort of was a moment where I thought back and said, yes, they don't learn like us. They don't like lists. They don't like textbooks. They don't like to go from one thing to another. They scan things. यहाँ से highlighted उनको चीजें होती हैं बस एक picture लेते हैं अपने ज़हन में and it's working out for them. So I think that's also important for us to keep up with those things and not expect the same kind of learning from them the way this will be done.
Any more? Okay, with this, we are concluding this session, and thank you so much, Dr. Aisha, Dr. Taranisa, and Mr. Habib, for taking your time out and attended this session. Thank you so much all, and the tea is served outside. Thank you. Thank you.